checking out your setup.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a similar setup, so I'm like trying to see how much better you guys are. You can put this in the actual film. It kind of be sweet. Like in the beginning, you throw out some of these things. I kind of like that.
We're kind of getting to know each
Yeah,
other.
yeah. It's part of the fucking film.
So as you know, since it sounds like you do this stuff as well, just if you can try to like repeat the question in your response a little bit,
Sure.
so we have some context.
Sure.
That would be excellent.
Although you have a nice voice. Sure.
So if we could start by just having you introduce yourself and tell us who you are.
My name is Bassam Haddad. I teach at George Mason University at the Shar School for Policy and Government, and I'm the director of the Middle East and Islamic Studies program also at George Mason University.
And so how did you come to this work that you do? How did you get here?
Which aspect? The academic work or the other work, nonprofit or?
I'd love to hear about both. Yeah.
Okay. How much time do you have?
Like 20 years.
I'm just joking.
Yeah.
No, because it's I'm old and I've been working constantly, so I have been teaching, of course, since I finished my PhD at Georgetown University since 2002, and I have also at the same time been working on, of course, my book and my publications. Whereby I had to balance between teaching. I first taught at Georgetown for a year, then went to St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia for 3 years, came back and got the directorship job at George Mason in 2007 and have been there ever since. I was writing my book for during that period, which came out in 2011, 2012 on the political economy of authoritarian resilience in Syria and the business networks that pervade countries like Syria, mostly developing countries. And now I'm working on my second book, which is on the background of the Syrian uprising, and as well as on the dynamics of the Syrian uprising. And that is sort of one trajectory of what I do. It's my main job. On the other hand, I have also been for now some 25 years working with in a non-profit capacity to build institutions that produce knowledge. So since 1992, when I founded the Arab Studies Journal at Georgetown University, which became a peer-reviewed research journal several years after, that was the beginning of the nonprofit, which is now a larger umbrella institution that includes 5 organizations. One of them is the Arab Studies Journal, which started in 1992. And everything happened within that umbrella. It's called the Arab Studies Institute again. And later we actually started a film collective, which was launched in 2002. And we debuted our work by going to Iraq, to Baghdad, right after the invasion in 2003. We were the first team worldwide to actually enter Baghdad after the invasion and document what Iraqis thought of their president, the U.S. invasion, and the war. And we produced a film that became an award-winning film. It won the best documentary at the Big Apple Film Festival in New York in 2004 or 2005. I don't recall exactly. And became until today, and is until today, one of the more authentic films because we were able to capture the moment that very few others have been able to capture, document, and then produce in a film. That very like sort of virgin moment whereby a camera crew just comes in and just opens the mic for you. So, and then we produced a couple of other films, including a really larger project shot in 11 countries in 6 languages, titled "What is Said About Arabs and Terrorism," which is basically about the discourse, the dominant discourse in the United States primarily, on the question of terrorism and its relationship to the Arab and Muslim world. And then we produced another film on the, interestingly, on the question of refugees and immigrants in Europe, titled "The Other Threat." and so on and so forth. But we then got derailed because everybody in the non-profit collective, which is mostly voluntary based, I mean, totally voluntary based actually, until 2012 when we started receiving some funding. We all got busy with our PhDs or books or getting other things out. So we had a bit of a hiatus, not too long, and we were always working on the existing projects. And then in 2010 or 2007 or 8, we created the sort of research arm of the Arab Studies Institute. It's titled Forum on Arab and Muslim Affairs, FAMA. You can check it out at fama.org or famanow.org. And that became sort of the place where we do, I mean, what other people might call think tankish stuff, but we don't like the word think tanks, and we don't really produce for policy purposes. So it's a research arm. And then in 2010, we actually launched Jadaliya.com, which is our online magazine that produces daily analysis on the Middle East, produced by academics for a broader public, which was the niche we were able to fill, which allowed us to expand beyond our wildest dreams within a very short period of time, even before the uprisings started. And that is because there was a huge gap between the production of books in terms of knowledge production at that kind of, like, usually, sometimes higher level, sometimes not really, but in all cases a production that took a year, 2 or 3 to actually come to fore. And then on the other hand, you had these daily blogs or very personal blogs or blogs that focused on security or international relations or foreign policy, but not much analysis happening on a weekly or daily basis. And then, of course, the news. The news is not what we were interested in. We were interested in analyzing the news. In the middle, there was a huge gap. Jadaliya filled that gap in a way that represented not only good analysis and alternative analysis, but it also represented analysis from the region. A lot of our writers were from the region as well as from outside the region. So it wasn't an outside-in analysis like many of the existing blogs and websites. It was an inside-out analysis. So we were read in the region as if we were a local paper or a local publication. And that is what gave us our special edge. The other thing that gave us the special edge, of course, was the fact that we were publishing in Arabic and in English, and then, of course, later in French and Turkish. The point is that this combination of people from the region and from without, working from an inside-out perspective, the multilingual approach, the multidisciplinary approach, the fact that we added a lot of literature and poetry to our production, cultural material, not just the social sciencey stuff, which added a dimension that was even more sharp analytically at times. Those elements, and on top of the fact that we were flexible in terms of format, we weren't looking for the op-ed, the 800 to 1200 words op-ed. We would publish short form and long form. We would publish Arabic and English together. We would publish poetry and social science material together. It really became a new experience and attracted a lot of people. And then the uprisings started in 2010 in December, and then January 2011. And that catapulted the entire publication to an entire different realm, several orders of magnitudes higher than what we were very satisfied with in, say, November 2010, which is just a few months after we launched. And that became sort of our, front, our storefront for ASI. Nobody knew ASI existed until today. We haven't really pushed the idea that there's this umbrella. Some people joke about how we don't want to do this because we don't want to seem like a small empire. At some level, it's partly that, because we're not interested in bigness. We're interested in producing good knowledge and so on. But also partly because these different organizations do different things. And they're not for profit. So the mentality of people in a mostly capitalized world and capitalized market, or marketized world, if you will, wanna sort of, they like conglomerates. They like to bring things together and produce them as one because that increases profit. In the absence of our desire for profit, there's no need to do that. But there is need to sort of connect the dots sometimes. That's why now people are hearing more and more about the Arab Studies Institute. That became of course, our fourth project or organization. The fifth one was Tadween Publishing, which was launched in 2012. It's basically a publishing house that is innovative, new, interactive, that actually tries to go beyond the traditional publishing house, also to replicate what Jadaliya has done in the realm of daily analysis. We are doing it in Tadween in the realm of publishing. So we do publish cartoons, novels, and things of the sort beyond the social sciences, and memoirs and so on. Also in Arabic and in English, we have just started recently to push our Arabic section in Tadween publishing. You can see all of this at arabstudiesinstitute.org. Everything is laid out, very simple, straightforward. The last project that actually emerged in 2014 was, and I promise I will stop there. Okay, the last project. It's tiring. No wonder all my family and friends hate me. By the way, I say this, but the fact is that this journey involved hundreds of people until today. The Arab Studies Institute is a nonprofit solidarity-based organization that has spread, basically through the United States, the Middle East, and Europe to an extent, with about 140, sometimes more, people working on it in different capacities. So without that kind of teamwork and without the autonomy that we were very happy to provide to people that we trusted, we couldn't have gotten here. And in fact, there's no longer like a we in the sense that the core had to exist in the beginning, but now it's much more of a real collective. The we or the core sort of jumps into the field when something either breaks down or there's a real shortage. So there is a body of people, a group of people who are sort of irrationally committed, so that they would actually jump in to save the day if needed in any of these organizations. Long story short, 2014, we realized that our production, even video production, documentary production, which produces documentaries that are 40, 50 minutes long or an hour and a half long, was not really the way people are consuming knowledge as much anymore. Even in the documentary world, people are going to the shorter segments, which is not making us happy, but this is the reality. In print, lots of publications are running out of business, if you will, in quotation marks, and moving to something else, which is online, which is why we wanted to also create Jadaliya. But then, in the past several years, as a function of multimedia, the number of people that are accessing news and information and knowledge through audiovisual media it has been increasing. Podcasts is a great example, and actually it's a respectable example because you're still interested in the content. You want to hear what people are saying. For the most part, the podcasts out there are substantive, or at least they're basically they're not Hollywood. I mean, we still always thank the universe. We have a sort of a low threshold of Hollywood to always compare things to, because it's not yet Hollywood, although we're like slowly moving there in some respects, in some areas. So we produced what we call now Status. It's or Al-Wada in Arabic. It's also bilingual, actually multilingual, but it's mainly Arabic and English. It's an audio magazine. We called it audio journal first, and then we moved to audio magazine because I'm not sure exactly why, actually, but I think there was a discussion about how if we call it journal, it's going to make people yawn by the time you reach the L in the word journal. So we called it audio magazine because people think, oh, magazine, pictures. But then they, listen, and it's like actually quite substantive. The point is that that was launched in 2014 and brought to the audience that we have, and even a broader audience, similar material as we have in Jadaliya, for instance, but in audio. and it represented usually casual conversations with people in the region and here in Arabic and in English in ways that ultimately represents the, if you will, the critical version of NPR on the Middle East. And it actually grew very quickly. And now we're on iTunes. When we publish an issue, we publish once every 3 months usually, but we publish things in between. We get sometimes more than 1,000 downloads a day, and it really allowed us to complement our production of text and hard copy text on websites on the internet with an audio visual dimension that comes out regularly, and now we're moving slowly into video without abandoning audio, and all of these things are what we do on a daily basis across the board while maintaining our jobs. And the genius of it is that we're not like into ASI is not about plumbing and then we have our academic jobs, and it's basically two realms. It's actually what we do. So I work on Syria, and when I do the interviews and the writing and the editing, I edit and write a lot on Syria. So it complements my academic job and my academic interests. It actually enhances my academic position because I'm able to actually reach out more beyond the normal sort of library research experience. So that helped a lot, which is why we were able to maintain a group of what arguably is today, because we started a while ago and we worked with we were graduate students and we worked with graduate students and undergrads, but today a lot of the people who stuck around even after we told them, okay, you're done, thank you very much, your 1 year stint or internship sometimes is over, but they actually, a lot of them stick around or leave and come back because of the kind of energy and synergy they find at the Arab Studies Institute, with the lack of hierarchy, with the presence of ample solidarity and a clear message that is not dogmatic but is actually quite stimulating, not without faults, not without mistakes, not without all kinds of imperfections, which we are very keen on working on, because that's all we have is our solidarity based on these things. We don't have salaries, we don't have perks, except reciprocity vis-a-vis all kinds of needs that everyone seeks, like recommendations, support, reading of material, feedback, networking. So at this point, we're basically not on automatic, but we're trying to stop the expansion and basically enhance the deepening, which is our project for the long haul. So we always assume this is going to sound violent. So if people have are not interested in this, they can just stop listening for a couple of seconds. But we always assume that we all like drown in a sort of ship or on a cruise. Everybody at the ASI, somebody should be able to come in, look at the standard operating procedures for every aspect of what we do in all the organizations, and be able to continue. So we need to have some way of people having access to the know-how, but also we need to have established institutional sustenance, which is why we finally succumbed to, in 2011, 2012, to basically seeking and receiving funding. In fact, the first funding opportunity we had was not one that we sought. We were contacted as Shadaliya and asked if we are looking for funding, and we were like, oh, yeah, we are. And then we actually were able to get that, and then build a portfolio of sorts that allow us to sustain our work on a yearly basis from funding from sources that are frankly mainstream and not necessarily as radical or as progressive sometimes as we are, but they're considered from our point of view acceptable sources, so long as we do not have any strings attached, not only in terms of direct strings attached, but also indirect strings attached, which means that we don't have to sort of limit what we do in order to satisfy the next round, which is why we are keen on also not going crazy and making fundraising our priority. That sort of ends up not enslaving us, but subordinating what we do. So It's a delicate position, and here we are. I I'll shut up now.
I'm just gonna, the battery just started flashing, so I'm just gonna switch out to the thing. And then,
I'll just cut then.
Were you able?
about that.
Well, it's tricky. It's tricky because a lot of people are not immediately interested in what's happening abroad, even if we have troops, U.S. Young men and women fighting abroad. So it's tricky. And then even when you know about it and you're somewhat interested, it's like a blur. It's like most college students couldn't even identify Iraq on the map. The majority, actually, the overwhelming majority, not just the 50+%. So that was sort of our wake up call after 2003. So what I think, I mean, the best way to understand the empathy has a lot to do with our conditions at home in the United States. However, I think the answer is actually more structural than just our ability and will to do something. And of course, we need to do that. We need to always make understanding the world in which we live more stimulating and more interesting and more relevant to our lives. But what I think has been happening is that, structurally speaking, the conditions in the United States have actually gotten young people to be more and more interested in the rest of the world because things are not as well as they have been for perhaps a couple of other generations before that. So there is an interest now. There is a real interest, and there is actually less less of a tendency to drink the U.S. Kool-Aid in terms of what we are, and in terms of our place in the world and our actual actions in the world. So that is very positive. That has been complemented by a lot of efforts. People, institutions doing good work regarding knowledge production on the region, on foreign policy, have actually also played a role. And the third thing, in the case of the Middle East studies, I'm saying the third thing as if I'm really organized and prepared, but I really didn't think about this earlier. I'm thinking about this as I share with you. The third thing actually has been the actual event or protracted set of events called the Arab uprisings, when young people in the United States saw hundreds of thousands and millions of people in the streets in these countries that they thought like were very happy and content with authoritarianism, go to the streets and fight fight with their bare bodies, fight like a regime that is shooting at them, while they are seeking a better, more dignified world for them. That was inspiring, and those reverberations that we witnessed everywhere from Portugal to Wisconsin are real. They're not just a coincidence, and they represented the part of the influence and the effect that the Arab uprisings had. So I think these are all good examples of what happened to increase the interest. But the second one is actually the aspect we can control, the one whereby we are actually actively trying to promote what has happened. For instance, in the yesterday, the discussion on Syria here at Oberlin, and my talk on Syria that also tries to connect, globally speaking, local economic change and formulas with global ones and American ones, actually also help people understand the connections, that divide that basically separated these two worlds, the East and the West, whatever these things are, is actually slowly not disappearing, but slowly fading.
And what did you want to share with the Oberlin students the most as part of a speaker for this Global Issues Symposium?
I actually it's kind of mushy. Is mushy the word?
I think I know what you mean.
Yeah. I love coming here. I've been here a couple of times before, and I've always enjoyed the. It's not just the intellect, because the intellect is also impressive in the sense that people are focused and sharp and ask really good questions, but also I just felt that people cared at Oberlin. I have given talks in many places in the United States, and I do regularly. And there are places like that, but there are very few. And Oberlin has always been a place where I encountered a caring, impassioned, and sharp student body that was interested in the topics as if they were their own, whether or not the level of knowledge basically, reached an expertise level or just an introductory level. There is a desire to learn. There is a desire to empathize, not sympathize, empathize, and there is a desire to to do something about the world after every lecture, discussion, class, because I'm also showing up in classes and talking and meeting people at cafes and lunches and talking about various issues. There's a desire to actually do something, and that is really remarkable. And it's not coming from this sort of only this sort of like radical desire to like change the system, and overhaul and revolutionize, which I'm not against actually, but it's not that kind of like fervor. It's actually across the spectrum. It's sober, and it just seems that it's likely to be effective. And maybe I'm over romanticizing this because I really like Oberlin and like the scenery and the setting. But the fact is that the student body here is remarkable, and you guys should be proud of it. I mean, I'm not exaggerating in that sense.
Do you have anything else?
Did I kiss up enough? No, I mean it. I actually mean it.
It's nice to hear.
Yeah, it is.
No,
You're like, really? We're like that?
part of us say a little more.
Go on. You know what I said about the time earlier? The time constraint? I just got a call. We can go on.
I should check where I'm at. Yeah.
I mean, how can I top that?
Yeah. I think we got everything we
That
need.
was a lovely
Yeah.
note to end on.
No, it's serious. Serious. I mean it. Like even my connection with you guys and interaction has been like lovely, like pleasant. Oh shit, I wanted to say pleasant. I would love to have that interview. It's so cool. Like I feel like it's my hug to Oberlin.
Yeah.